go to University of Denver to get master's degrees. They don't like all this stuff. This is really, no. They buy into globalization and they just want to be contemporary modern. So when they go home and see the politics and the spectrum, how do you suppose they're going to do? Are they going to get in the room and make governmental decisions about Chinese strategy? Now, back up a little bit. This is 1966 to 68. There were some hawks around then. Strange things happened. Some of these people are the fathers of today's hawks. Chief of Staff of the Chinese Army. So imagine Chief Nordy Schwartz, okay, taken out and beaten, put in a basket, brought up in front of a bunch of Harvard graduate students to yell at him, throw, and then die. Almost died. Let's pick somebody. Pacific Command, Admiral Blair. This is the Sichuanese, this is the Chengdu Military Regional Commander. Beaten, humiliated, China sort of falls apart. This is the President of China and his wife. He gets put in jail by Mao. He dies fairly painfully. His ashes are, his wife is tormented. This is some pearls she was given on her Indonesian trip. Putting the pearls on to say, look at this foreign influence monster. In 1980, it's all over. Military helps restore order. Gang of Four radicals all go to jail, and the ashes of the former president of China are given back to the widow. And here's this young guy in the background. Who's the young guy? Oh, how'd you know that?
Because the youth.
In the background is the son of the, basically, I hate to say murdered, tortured to death, president of China, watching his mom get his father's ashes. Now, what is he thinking? He's thinking, I think I want to become a general, which he does. And he writes some of the best stuff of the hawks of China. One of his recent long prefaces to somebody else's book is basically says, force, violence, blood, and war are responsible for all great human achievements in history. Now, if you're a little bit curious, what do I mean by hawk? That's a hawk. He is one of my kind. He's a friend, I would say, an advisor to the current president of China, without a doubt. Appears in photos with him. Again, what happened to his father? Back in 1971, military, in some sense, tries to take over as to seize power. Half of the Chinese top leadership gets executed. The others are on this plane that crashes. So what did the politicians do to hawks who get out of line? That's the lesson of this photo. What happens if you're not careful with the moderate politicians? By the way, here's a young PLA officer. I first met him in 1980. He's very quiet. Came to the Pentagon with a delegation with China's defense minister, a guy named Gun Biao. Wouldn't talk much. Very shy. I could see from his socks that he wasn't a regular PLA officer because his socks didn't match his uniform. This young officer, I wish I'd got his name card or talked with him more. Guess what he does today?
Number one.
Oh, no leaking. He's the president of China. This is Xi Jinping. Now he's made a second visit to the Pentagon 2 years ago. He didn't seem to remember. He rises up through the ranks. He decides, I'm not going to stay in the PLA. I'm going to become a party man. He runs counties. He takes over China. What's the first thing he does? This is fascinating. The Hawks have a slogan called Fuxing Jiru. Fuxing Jiru. Who knows what that means? Rejuvenation of China. Okay, but
Revival of China.
The road to revival of China. We must take the road to revival or rejuvenation of China. That's right. And how do we find out what this road is? We go to the National Museum in Beijing, which is completely dominated by a hawk narrative. There's nothing about America helping to win World War II or beat the Japanese. There's a picture of American officers seated on the emperor's throne in Beijing in 1900. And there's a big map up on the wall. Susan saw this with me. Big map up on the wall is an American map of how to divide up Beijing to be occupied by the 8 armies that have come into Beijing to occupy the city. So the impression you get as you're walking through, oh my God, should I be going to the University of Denver, Center for Chinese-American Cooperation? No, these people sit on our throne, they divide up our country, and the story about America throughout this whole display is five stories in the National Museum in Beijing. Only one good thing about America is in it. So is Deng Xiaoping wearing a white cowboy hat at a Texas rodeo. And then it explains Deng Xiaoping got an enormous amount of science and technology from the Americans. It's also well known he got started the idea that several 100,000 Chinese students would go to America. So what is the Chinese hawk view of America? As expressed where President Xi went on almost his first day with the other, this is the top 7 who run China. This is the standing committee poll. He took them all over there, made a speech. American science and technology is extremely important to China. Bringing Chinese students to America to study nanotechnology, biomedical, anything is good. Why? Because we're Wu-Wei archer. We're getting someone else to paint our fence. This is of extremely high importance to China's hawks. What's the best way to ruin, what's the worst thing you could do? America is helping China enormously. Make the Americans angry. Upset them. Say something deliberate to them, such as a very famous quotation from Chairman Mao in 1955 that's been brought to light in a new book by a hawk, one of my favorite hawks, Colonel Liu Ming-fu. He gave me the idea from my book title. He wrote a book about the 100-year marathon. In the book, he quotes Mao. Mao said, China's greatest contribution to mankind will be overcoming and surpassing the United States of America. This is a sentence you will never see or never hear from the Chinese. You'll never see it on billboards. You won't see it in my favorite newspaper, China Daily. Why not? What would it mean to the Americans who are competitive, arrogant, think they belong to be number 1 because they're the smartest? What would happen if China started saying every day, our greatest contribution to humanity is going to be to surpass you Americans? Among some people, it would be a good thing. We Americans have our chance, go ahead and surpass us, we don't care. But there's some group in America that wouldn't like it. And they might have political power. So that is one of the big fears of the Chinese hawks. The Americans have already, this is a famous speech President Xi gave, the Americans have already begun to wake up. So China has to start moving even faster. One of the things is the military program in space. President Xi thanking 3 Chinese astronauts, including this woman here on the left, the national hero of China. Anybody know why China, whether China has a NASA or not? We have a civilian space program. We're very proud of it. We didn't let the evil U.S. Air Force go into space for civilian purposes. We said, evil U.S. Air Force, I'm mocking, of course, a little bit. You can do your Air Force programs, they're all secret, and don't talk about it. But NASA, we're going to create something called NASA. NASA's going to the moon. NASA's going to be a charge in space. So we, as taxpayers, we pay for 2 twin, equally expensive space programs. NASA and the U.S. Air Force. It's a little help from the Navy. Now, that's a good thing in our culture. Why? We don't want to weaponize space. It's a bad thing to put weapons up in space. How about the Chinese view? As one Chinese said to me, one Chinese general, how stupid can you get to have 2 space programs? If you have 1 space program, it can be twice as big. So, these are military officers going into space. time would tell us in exchange programs, only imperialist powers have aircraft carriers. France, England, America, you know, and smaller countries like Thailand and Spain and so forth, because they have an imperialist thinking. We Chinese, it's in our constitution, Dr. Pillsbury. We will never seek hegemony. So that's why we Chinese will never have aircraft carriers. The very sign of a hegemon. This is President Xi touring China's new aircraft carrier. Now, it's bad, it's slow, it's small, it's purchased from the Russians, you know, it's nothing like our big aircraft carriers. But the interesting thing is, if it's morally pure not to have an aircraft carrier, how did this happen? In the memoir of one of my favorite hawks has come out, the head of the Chinese Navy, wrote a memoir, how he tried to get aircraft carriers in the 80s and was turned down by the political leadership. Fascinating story. It's a little bit like the Chris Hill memoir, where he's describing, he goes around various parts of the Navy, goes to see China's president, we've got to have aircraft carriers. And he's put down. Of course, obviously, ultimately, something happened. Now, I'm going to go into a section, go very fast here. It's an article I've written and published. It's trying to give you some idea of Chinese hawks' view of why we in China need a grand strategy. The economists and trade people, technology, education ministry, they're taking care of China's rejuvenation. Doing an excellent job. They never slow down, but still 3 times faster than us. So is there anything that we hawks have to worry about that the other people in China don't? And their answer is what I call the 16 fears. I hate to say paranoid, it's kind of an insulting term, so I say unrealistic or non-reality based fears that China has. My article got published, cited several hundred articles and books that need not detain us, but I want to show you some of the fears. One of the fears is foreign powers are going to give weapons to China's ethnic minorities and cause China to split up. Because there are evil foreign powers like that around. So this is President Xi being very friendly, which he frequently does, in this case to Uyghurs, Muslims in the far west, but he often does it with Tibetans and many others. One of the fears, several slides show this. One of the fears is the Americans are not what they seem to be. This is a very famous China expert, good friend of Professor Zhao's on the right, Chaz Freeman. Okay, Chinese love him. He is a man of peace. He loves China. When he's sitting next to Nixon, or in this case, President Reagan, this is President Reagan in Beijing, 1984, China feels secure. Professor Zhao, who's the other guy on the left here?
Nice? No.
Schultz.
Schultz.
Above Schultz. The head above Schultz, dark black hair.
Wolfowitz.
Come on, you all know him.
Wolfowitz.
Okay, you're right. Everyone knows Wolfowitz, right? He's Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia.
Holes in his socks.
What?
He has holes in his socks.
He's an American hawk.
So, the Chinese view of us, of course they project their own politics to some degree on us, is here are 2 poles over there in America. The hawks and the doves. Something good happens, it's probably Chaz Freeman. Something bad happens, it's Wolfowitz, or people like him. So, one of their fears is the bad guys in America are going to take over. This is another story. This is Jim Wilson. So, another fear is the Americans are going to know about the next 3 slides. Many hawks say the next 3 slides explain what happened in the spring and autumn and the Warring States period, what happened when a country rose too fast. What's the old hegemon do to a country that rises too fast? It crushes it in various ways. Here's China's GDP. The flag is showing China's economy about 1970 to 1980. About 10% of ours. The flag is meant to be 10 times bigger than the Chinese flag. Fast forward to last month. Everybody know this? International Monetary Fund announced China's economy is the same size as the U.S. Now, there's all kinds of ways to explain this away. Oh, it's a different when the World Bank and IMF announced that by some measures, the two economies are the same, what's the difference between the first slide and this one? Does the grand strategy the Americans had back then, or a team country, frankly, should be the same as it is now? The China hawks are afraid the Americans are in the process of changing their strategy toward China. And the worst thing of all, two Chinese economists, Lin Fu, Justin Lin, and Hua Gong, they've both written books. What's going to happen in 2030 and then in 2049? The marathon's over. What's going to be the size of the two economies? China's going to be triple the size of the American economy. Well, we can explain that away too. Well, you know, they don't have the quality of life we do, and you know, our cars are better. They don't have McDonald's as much as we do. Well, you can try to explain it away. But when a country is 3 times stronger than you economically, should you still have the same kind of grand strategy if you're this side as you had back in the slide before? The hawks of China are saying no. The Americans are going to do something bad to prevent this from happening. Okay, I think we'll skip through this. One interesting problem about American experts on China, diplomats, military officers, professors, except for Professor Chow, he's accepted to this criticism. The national security hawks in China aren't downtown. They're not in the Chinese Academy of Social Science. They're not in the downtown think tanks or universities. They're way out of town, 10 to 15 miles west, in the west of Beijing. There are 6 main units out there. So my specialty, which has made me very biased, my specialty under orders from the government, I didn't know much about this in the beginning, make friends with these people, help them. Not alone when I have to go with delegations, thank God, if you happen to know. And Susan's in my favorite hotel to stay out there. This is some advertising for you. It's called the Aman Summer Palace Resort. This beautiful piece of old Summer Palace China is now a hotel. You can stay there, and across the street is the Central Committee Party School. Next door is China's CIA. Of course, they don't want to use the term CIA, so they use the term KGB, which when translated into Chinese becomes Go on Hu, which means, back in English, Ministry of State Security. So we end up with MSS. Party School, Central Committee leaders trained there, including generals. Ministry of State Security, National Defense University, right here, in some ways home of the Hawks, I think that's spelled there. And next door to the National Defense University, the Academy of Military Science, which is not an academy at all. It's a research arm and policy making and strategy writing arm of the Central Military Commission. Professor Chow knows very well. So to see those places, you have to go out there. They're hard to get into. Can Western reporters go in? No. How about CNN camera crew? Take a picture of the Hawks in the chapel. No. How about the American Pentagon? With difficulty. And you'll all be happy to know, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've doubled, almost tripled, the number of military exchanges between the Chinese military and the U.S. Defense Department. It's very hard, because the Hawks are quite suspicious, at least on the Chinese side. American Hawks are kind of curious. They'd like to learn more in person. It's a very American thing. I can read Professor Zhao's books on Chinese nationalism and patriotic education movement and so forth. Well, I don't really believe it. They couldn't, couldn't think that way. But when we have a banquet, and the Chinese, and I can encourage the Chinese officer to talk about something, who do you think would suffer the most damage in a nuclear war? It's a good topic of conversation at dinner. China or America? And the Americans are all thinking, there'll be no more China. It'll be gone. A small percentage of our American nuclear weapons applied to China means China doesn't exist anymore. And China can do very little to us as typical American officers. So then then the Chinese government takes a piece of his beef, chews it. He says, America's losses will be many times greater than China's losses. We don't fear nuclear war. Our people know how to eat vinegar. True. Another fear is peculiar to Chinese geography by what they call a tragedy of the Malacca Straits. China's oil supply has not only come through the little strait here, it has to go past what country? That country right there, juts down into the ocean. Give you a clue, what's the name of the ocean? And what has America been doing the last 10 years or more with India? As far as the Chinese hawks are concerned. Selling weapons. India is now the largest buyer of American weapons in the world. And by geography, India sits right there, didn't used to have one particular kind of weapon. Maritime patrol aircraft, even its proper name. Plane that can go out 1,000 miles, look around, use sensors, and in the back, here's the little surprise, in the back are torpedoes. Open the door, torpedoes come out, or anti-ship missiles. Indians first heard about this, hey, we'd like 8. We said basically, that's many billions of dollars. When do we sign the contract? Now they want 4 more. They're flying. They're flying where Chinese oil tankers come out of the Middle East and go through Singapore. So a lot of hawks are very concerned about American intentions. Why would you, of all things, make military friends with India? And why would you sell P-8s? Not to mention another list of things. South China Sea. This is a structure concerns the fears of the hawks that China's GDP today about 10%, according to Zhang Dangyi of the Guojia Haiyangyu. China has something we don't have, which is a big maritime department, you might call it. Runs the Coast Guard, makes estimates of the economy's dependence on resources in China's economic zone and elsewhere. They now think it's at least 10% and growing. So China needs the South China Sea's resources. Always many maps say it's ours. The other little countries say, no, it's not, that's not right. Now the Americans have inserted themselves since 2010, so the Chinese are building structures in order to cement, you might say, bad pun, because this is cement, their claims to resources. The last really big fear I want to go into is land invasion. Land invasion. We try to watch the Chinese military exercises, what kind of weapons they buy, what are they afraid of? And it's very hard for us, typical Army officers, it's very hard for us to grasp the idea of America being invaded from several different sides. Mexico, drugs and undocumented aliens, yes, but tanks, Canada, no. So it's very difficult for us to think ourselves into a country that in the past has been invaded by land. So we see these massive numbers of concerns involved buying tanks, protecting the capital of Beijing. It's a kind of non-reality based view. We've been invaded before, the last 1,000 years or more, we're going to get invaded again. Lots of money spent on this, and then another nightmare. Part of the invasion would be the invading power to link up with our minorities to try to withdraw. So we see these huge crackdowns in China on protests that on their face look innocent by Chinese minorities. Well publicized, so others in China know. Another related fear, the pipelines. Getting much more dependent on pipelines in China. They can be destroyed by settlement. This is General Zhu Zhenghu's map. This is a famous incident when a good friend of Susan's and mine, and I think Professor Korbel, he's been here, right? General Zhu Zhenghu has a great name. His name literally means pig becoming tiger. General Zhu gave a press conference not fully appreciating what he was saying, I think, that in the event of an American, someone Chinese-American war scenario as casually as talking about what's the temperature outside. And there are people who notice this. Basically, I don't think an American official of a similar type, American Major General, would casually discuss with a press conference the details of a Chinese-American nuclear war. That would be considered not a good topic. The counter to this is Hawks have a counter to us. How are we going to handle these fears? We're going to develop something called, based on Song Dynasty and Warring States period ideas, they call the Assassin's Mace program. They got the president of China to say this. For a long time, it just appeared in writings, Assassin's Mace programs will save China. Then all of a sudden, John's them in. Said, well, 非常需要，你下手剑，你上网，你赶快发展。And so now, 15 years later, we start to see this. Systems being built to take out U.S. aircraft carriers, including missiles. Beautiful little catamaran. Catamaran, you know, pleasure sailing, go to and from Hong Kong and Macau to go gambling. No. Wu Wei Archer, get the other guy to paint the fence for you. Buy catamaran models that are very fast, faster than U.S. Navy ships. Put on them highly advanced anti-ship missiles that have a very long range, longer range than U.S. Navy ships in the area. And build, let's say, 100 of them, just like that. Because who's the biggest ship manufacturing country in the world? China. So it's quite easy. But it's an example of what's called an assassin's mace. You don't match the American ship with ship. You build something that will attack the Achilles heel of the other side. These are very hard to see, and there's lots of them. Finally, Americans have advertised a great deal. Everything America does in the military sphere depends on satellites. So all of a sudden, China tests an anti-satellite missile. When we asked them nicely, are you ever going to do this again? You know, this is really quite surprising. You do this. You attack your own weather satellite. You know, we understand. You're just testing. But what's the meaning of this? And until today, Professor John, there's no Chinese explanation and no promise they won't do it again. So 90% of the Pentagon's communications, targeting, intelligence goes through